Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first video in English of Women in Voice Italy series, Women in Conversational AI. So today we have as a special guest, Falene McKenna. Thank you and very welcome to our first video in English.
I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be the inaugural voice in English. So let's hope I don't butcher it, eh?
You won't, I'm sure. Okay, so just can you tell us about yourself and how you started your career in voice?
Sure, yeah. Funny story. I went for an entire education in linguistics. I wanted, and still a little bit today do, want to be a linguist. I wanted to work to help revitalize languages that were in danger. Sorry, that's my dog. So I got my degrees in Canadian native languages out of Canada. That's where I'm originally from. And then during my PhD, a couple things happened. I ended up in Israel, of all places, and I applied for a job as a content writer. They wanted a native English speaker who understood phonetics and phonology, and so I applied. I unfortunately did not read that they wanted a Native American speaker, and my accent, which you may or may not notice, was a little bit wrong. So they said, nah, maybe not. And they did follow up with however, we would love to have you as a QA. Would you please interview for that? And I did. And then I spent a year in doing QA, and then I spent a year as a director of technical support, helping install units, working in research. Again, I apologize. Working alongside research institutes. And that was really fun. I got to engage on all sorts of sides of the industry. And then I decided, you know what? QA is nice. Being a director of something is fabulous. But I wanted to build systems. So I decided to become a developer. All of this is inside of the same company, Intuition Robotics. Intuition Robotics builds a robot called LEQ. She is a conversational AI agent inside of a robot body that is designed to help older adults age in place, but not just age in place, to age happily in place. She helps to reduce loneliness and to engage people proactively, to look after their health, to exercise, to play games. She asks if you've gone outside. She tells the worst dad jokes and loves puns. And I am currently a developer, and I've been doing that for about 2.5 years now. And that's a little bit of who I am. Also, I have a dog. You may or may not hear him in the background. His name is Gilgamesh, and he is adorable.
So, what's the funniest part of your job and the least funny?
So I'll start with the least funny. One of the issues, I think, in working in conversation design, when you have a target audience that is maybe more of a protected population, is that sometimes what you write, what you design, can actually very negatively impact an individual. So as we all know, fail and repairs happen. Sometimes your speech is not heard correctly, TTS fails, it's an issue. We can get people who are very emotionally distraught by this. And part of one of the research projects that we did to look at loneliness, we had one of our participants become quite emotionally invested in our robot, in LEQ. And it was very difficult to see us separate the two. And so the least funny part is that sometimes what you say can very, very, very much impact a person. So maybe not in a bad way. We have people who absolutely adore her, but it's not funny. It's just serious at that point. But then to leave on a happier note, funniest thing of my job, I remember back in the early days, I was listening to what we were producing, and I was trying to change it. So I very quickly learned SSML, and I learned that sometimes we could fix the problems that we were saying. And I was maybe working for about 3 or 4 months when we changed our tagline to Sidekick for Happier Aging. And then we had LEQ say it. And it sounds like a fine tagline, but SSML, not SSML, but the text-to-speech engine that we were using couldn't parse it correctly. Because if you're a linguist, you understand rhoticization, and sometimes you can have an assimilation of a quality onto different vowels. So LEQ would say, "Hi, I'm LEQ, your sidekick for happier raging," which of course is hilarious. Love it. But it wasn't what we wanted. And so we spent a number of hours, and in fact, I think I took about 3 days to do it, trying to figure out how we could parse happier aging. Because there's a tiny little glottal at the beginning of the A. It's not enough that it really matters, but it's enough that you don't get raging. And we couldn't do it. We went back and forth. We used Amazon Polly at the time, and we just couldn't get it. We were trying to figure it out, and we were apparently glottal stops are not something that Amazon Polly understands inside of their phoneme tag, which go figure. It took us a while, and I remember going to my CEO and saying, "Could we just maybe change the tagline of the whole company? That'd be great." And eventually we did parse it, but for a while there, she was your sidekick for happier raging. So that was probably one of the funniest parts.
That's funny. Actually, I don't know if you know that I call you the queen of SSML.
Thank you. That's so nice.
So, can you tell us what it is, and also what we should consider, maybe minimum requirements that we should take into account when building conversational AI projects?
Yeah. So SSML, it's a markup language. It's used for speech synthesis. Wow. If you didn't know that I struggled with English, now you do. And it's my native language. Speech synthesis markup language. So essentially what happens with SSML is that it looks at text to speech, and if you have any tags inside of your speech, you're trying to edit it using SSML tags, it will adjust that speech. Typically, you can have prosody, pitch, phoneme is a very strong one. Also say as, so if you have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, you maybe want to read them as first, second, third, ordinal or cardinal numbers. But the way that text-to-speech works is essentially you have text, it goes through a process, and it becomes audio. That to process, that middle part, is where you can make edits. What that text does is it goes and it separates out into parts. Sometimes it's diphones, biphones, phonemes in general, just sounds that are associated with letters, and then it puts them together. The better systems will likely have a more diverse parsing, so it's not whole word, but in some cases it is simply whole word processing, which can mean that sometimes the sounds don't work correctly. An example that I like to use a lot is giraffe. So it's actually giraffe. However, in context, with a system that was looking at specifically letters equal sounds instead of letter groupings or full words, we heard giraffe. And in order to edit that, we would need to first isolate the parts that we know are wrong. Sometimes it's the consonants, sometimes it's the vowels, sometimes it's a combination of the two. And I think that linguists have a really interesting part where they come in, where they can say, I have this education, I know what these sound like, I can do something about it. And that's kind of where I got it from. I think that SSML is important for conversation design because nobody wants their system to sound blah. And SSML can not only fix your speech, it can fix sounds, and not fix so much as add. So if you want a dog crying in the background, you can have an SSML tag that says, in the middle of the conversation or in the middle of our talk, please put an ear con. This can be designed just in speech, but it can also be designed outside as a separate entity. So it really depends on where you go, but it does help you sound out how you want things to work. If you want someone to say something ominous and it goes dun dun dun, you would need to have inside of your SSML an ear con. Each of these change based on the system that they're in, but it is an essential part of conversation design because it allows you to modify. And not everything is perfect yet. Eventually, we'll get to this place where we have Gene Roddenberry's wife. I don't know if you know, but she's the voice of the Star Trek Enterprise. Mm-hmm. And basically, I think all of the Star Trek voices. And she can say every single word because it's all pre-recorded as one word. Eventually, we'll get to the point where automated or natural language generation can say everything like a person can. Until that point, it's up to us to tweak things so that they sound better, so that there's an emphasis in the right place, so that verbs are said like verbs instead of like nouns, because that's also an issue that SSML can help with. And I hope that answers the question, but I do think that SSML is pretty imperative to at least touch on.
Yeah. I have a question now that you said something. Isn't it a bit scary that artificial voices will be able to sound like human voices?
I think that we're already at the point where we're sort of getting to that, where we have such natural voices that are coming out. Microsoft's Azure has, now they can emote. There's different voices that have emotions, sad and terrified, and that's a little bit terrifying. But if you want to get into it, I can have a full debate about the changing typography of the uncanny valley, because I think that as we go forward, that becomes less and less of an issue. I think it's something that we're tied down to because of previous generations where having a computer sound like a person is weird. But we were also bogged down by the bodies and the embodiment of those voices. We couldn't have full conversations. We were already using IVR systems. Gilgamesh. We were already using IVR systems that use pre-recordings. And so we already are used to talking to something that sounds like a person because it's just a recording of a person, but isn't. So we have that. I think we're more and more used to it. And I think that there is a time, a place, and an occasion for more computerized voices, and a time, a place, and an occasion for less computerized voices. So I don't think it's scary, but I think that it's worth a full extra debate and an extra video if you ever want to do it.
Definitely, yes. Sure. So I have one last question, because you come from linguistics, then you went into development. So I'm not going to ask you, even if I'd like to, what would you prefer, but I'd rather ask you, what would you suggest to women who want to enter the space, the conversational AI space?
Well, I think the thing to do is to try to enter it. As a linguist, let's say you went and you got your master's, you already have project management. You already have all the skills needed. You have the linguistics, you have the writing, you have the marketing. You could enter any part of this field because you went and you got your stuff published. You went and you defended it. You spoke at conferences. You managed projects of undergrads, if not graduate projects. You have all of that experience. Now, if you're a hiring manager, I highly recommend that you look at that as experience. But if somebody doesn't look at that as experience, there's other ways that you as an academic could enter the field. And I'll suggest courses or workshops. The conversational design industry, there's a whole bunch of us. We're all pretty helpful. So you'll find on LinkedIn, if you join the right communities, there will be workshops that while it's going, you can follow along and build your own workflows. You can build your own chat bots or voice bots using voice flow. You can learn classes through Raza or through Cogniti. That's a really hard name. You can take Conversation Design Institute classes. Voice flow was a thing for a while, and that was helpful. Being able to have the same language as everybody else when talking about what they're going through is pretty important. It gives you a standard, and I think that the standards are something that it's going to ultimately come down to. What types of certificates do you have to get you the job? And then what kind of skills do you have to continue the job? A lot of places will ask for portfolios. Not always is it necessary, but it could be a stopping point, in which case those workshops are going to be really important to you. Those workshops are going to be the thing that says, I can produce, I can write. If you want to become a developer, then you need to have the skills to develop. Raza courses are pretty good to understand how the systems are built and coming through. I would, again, and I'm going to sound repetitive on this, go to the workshops, take the classes, even, and this does work in a lot of cases, Gilgamesh, this does work in a lot of cases, go ahead and apply to a job, do the interview. When they say, oh, you don't have a lot of experience, then you can say, listen, for this amount of money, you can train me to be this way. And then I will be the best because I have all of this. And I think a lot about entering the industry here is a lot about showing that you have personality, showing that you can build something, and maybe you don't have to be as forceful as we constantly are told we have to be, but you should be like, I can do it. Believe in me. You may not see it on my resume, but it's there. And I think that's really
that's an awesome suggestion, really. Thank you. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Well, I thought about a lot of stuff before going forward, and I had written it down, but I think that what I want to leave you with is that the industry needs underrepresented voices to be represented. The industry needs people to write the AI agents, because ultimately, and I think that this is really important, our agents are representatives of who writes them. So if you have a female voice, they should have a female persona. But a lot of that female voice personas are written by men. This is why you can get a little bit of a dichotomy between what is a male voice, what sounds a little bit more masculine or female. And there's a little bit of a push and pull there because they do represent us. And so they also represent the stereotypes we bring. And so if you are a writer and you say, hey, I'm writing for a Israeli audience, let's say, and then you go, what do I know about Israelis? Well, this is what I think. Did you hire someone from Israel? It's the same if you are trying to write for older adults. Sorry. Are you trying to write for older adults? If you're trying to write for older adults, it's important that maybe you consult with older adults, because representation of thought does not come without representation of bodies, of people. And so that is a selling point. If you are underrepresented, and lots of people are underrepresented, it's a field that we need more diversity in. That is a boon to you. Come into it from that perspective. I, as this group, can tell you about this group, and then it can help bring our industry forward. Because I think that all of what we want, there's so many extra sounds, all of what we want is for the industry to go forward, to move and to develop. And it's developing so quickly. And there's a lot of people here who have less than 5 years of experience, because it is quite new and growing. So just because you don't have the experience, just because they ask for 10 years, the industry has not been around for 10 years.
Yeah.
So apply, join us, enter into the field.
Yeah, I love this message. Yeah, right. It's true. And well, people who are underrepresented should know that there's room for everybody. So it's like, I think, a two-way, well, like any communication, also maybe companies who develop this kind of systems should maybe be more clear about they're willing to have underrepresented voices.
I was just gonna say that I agree, but my dog is agreeing with you verbally, so I muted myself. Sorry.
Okay, that was funny. Thank you very much for being with us, for everything that you've shared, and also to Gilgamesh.
Yes, he's a very important part. We work with him every single day, and he gives really good insight and input.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed Gilgamesh's input. It was very valuable, as I'm sure we'll all say.
Bye.
Bye.